Okay, so welcome everyone today. I didn't want to start too late because we have an amazing presenter today and a great presentation. So today's session webinar is Self-Care is Quality Care, Resiliency for Mental Health Providers. We're super excited to have Matt Bennett here with us today. So he is super dynamic speaker, excellent content, an expert in trauma-informed care. He also has his master's in community psychology and his MBA, has excellent focus on, a systems perspective. So we will be going into all of this. So I will just speak for a few minutes, give you all the housekeeping, and then pass it on to him. It's definitely a treat to have him on. Oh, next slide, please. Yeah, I forgot I wasn't sharing, so trying to forward myself. So just as I said, some general housekeeping. The session is being recorded, and the recording is going to be made available to everyone either at our STAR Center website, or for all those who have registered, it will be emailed to you. So we really love to have everyone be present and, if possible, to be on camera. We understand that's not always the case, but really, even though it is a webinar, just trying to make this as interactive as possible. The same with please using the chat box for any questions, comments, or thoughts. You can send to everyone so we can all see it. You can also send it directly to one of us here as a panelist, and we will let Matt know that the question came in. So really feel free to ask questions anytime during the presentation, and Matt will go ahead and answer them as they come in. Myself and Mariah will be on the lookout for any questions that come into the chat. If you do have any difficulties, any technical difficulties, please contact Mariah and she'll be able to help you. And then we do have an evaluation at the end of the session. We would be really grateful if you could please fill that out. It always helps us know how we can improve, do better, and really bring you all of these quality webinars. Next slide, please. So we're the Association of Clinicians for the Underserved. So as it says here, our focus is about increasing access to care and offering that clinical support, really focus on building the transdisciplinary team, focus on recruitment, retention. We were founded by National Health Service Corps alumni, so that's still very much at the foundation of what we do, and we offer resources, training, and networking. Next slide, please. And then today's webinar is being brought to you by one of the programs of ACU, which is the STAR Center. So we were awarded our NCA in 2014. We are funded by the Bureau of Primary Health Care. We're one of the 21 national training and technical assistance partners. And just like this webinar, what we produce, the resources we offer are free. We also have other training, technical assistance. This recording you can find right on the link that's on here. So chcworkforce.org is our STAR Center website. You can also contact us at info@chcworkforce.org. And now I have the pleasure to pass it over to Matt Bennett.
Thank you, Michelle. It's a pleasure to be back here. I think it was my second or third webinar with ACU. I was really bummed that the conference went virtual, though I respect that the conference went virtual. I have this faint memory of being in a conference and those great interactions and workshops and in the hallway, and next year. But I want to welcome you all. I want to thank you for having me to talk about what I think is the most important issue of our times right now, and that's our own self-care and well-being. As we still are battling this pandemic and all the other issues that we've been fighting through this last 20 months, it is getting to be time where we need to step back and look at our own health and wellness. And it's a great honor to be here to share my passion for this. Michelle gave a great introduction of me. I've been working in the trauma-informed care paradigm since about 2003 when I first saw the adverse childhood experience study as a therapist. And it really helped understand some of the behaviors and the struggles of the folks that I was working with, but also gave me a scientific foundation to really base my practice on. And then as I transitioned into leadership, how to really work, whether I was in housing, child welfare, education, how to really design programs based on this scientific foundation of what we were learning about trauma and the brain. And so pretty quickly on, as I started to learn about the impact of trauma on mental, relational, and medical health, I also looked around and including in the mirror and realized that a lot of folks providing these helping and healing services we're also exhibiting a lot of these very stress-based and even traumatic reactions to the work that we were doing. And so very early on in my journey into trauma-informed services, I really started to develop these different pillars within my thinking. One obviously is trauma-informed care. The other one is trauma treatment, access to best practices for trauma healing. But really, for me, the foundation of delivering trauma-informed care, or just any real best practice for that matter, is the health of our workforce and then trauma-informed leadership as well. And so I really want to share some of the best practices that I'm seeing emerge and some different ways to think about our own wellness, as I hope as we start to get on top of some of this, even though I know we're not quite there yet, that we can really shift and make sure that we are focusing also on our own recovery as well. So I just want to acknowledge a few things before we get going. One is what I love about training on self-care, really the goal of this entire training. How do you bring your best self to work every day? How do you, if you've been through some struggles lately, like I would acknowledge we all have, how do you recover from that? And again, bring your level of performance and quality up to the level that you desire it to be. The great thing about trying to be the best human beings we can possibly be, you can also apply some of this stuff. It's not a one-to-one ratio to the work that we do with patients and clients as well. What allows me to perform at my best is a lot of times what will help my clients live the life that they want to live as well. So I'll let you hold that while I speak specifically about you. Obviously, this is applicable for really any human beings. Also, just want to acknowledge, and I already have maybe 3 times already, just the current traumas that we're facing. You know, I'm almost at 50 years, a half century on this planet. I can't even come close to identifying a period of time in our country that compares the last 20 months. Obviously, the pandemic, a huge stressor, both personally and professionally. The biggest civil rights movement of my lifetime with the Black Lives Matter, but we've also had the violence against our Asian American friends. And sometimes I've in my state of Colorado, we've passed some great legislation for trans rights, but in other places, in the state, we've lost that, and there's been so many fights. Also, the political environment has been absolutely crazy, and the thing with the Black Lives Matter movement, COVID, you know, all these different pieces is these transition beyond just a work and home stressor, that unlike a lot of really challenges that I was presenting on before the pandemic hit, these all transform. Obviously, we show up to work, and I know I just have some huge heroes on this call. We fight for social equity against systematic racism each and every day that we show up to work. And so we've been doing this for a long time, but this heightened challenges us, hey, not only to look at how do we improve our community, but how do we address systematic racism in a healthcare system that has been plagued by it pretty much from the first creation of the system itself. How do we really look at this pieces? So I just want to say it has been a really intense 20 months, and this is where I say I want you, and this will be in the attachments that you got for this training, to walk out of here with a self-care plan. I know that's pretty aggressive goal for just having a little under 60 minutes with you, but I hope to give you enough to get you thinking about that. But if you find yourself struggling right now, one, I want you to know you're not alone. When I do surveys in my longer trainings, 90% of people on average that I train are identifying that they're in some stage of what I'll call helping fatigue, which only means 10% of people are self-identifying as doing great or doing decent even right now. So want you to think about and give yourself permission to, yeah, I want to bring my best self possible to work, but from what I've been through, what our clinics have been through, what our agencies have been through, we need, I think a lot of us, including I'm looking at myself here as well, to really focus on how do we recover our health and wellness? How do we recover that resiliency that has been challenged every single, almost minute of every single day for almost the last 2 years now. Also, a lot of people hear me talk about this, hear my passion, like, boy, this guy's got it figured out. I don't. I'll be honest with you. I really struggled. This spring, I was not doing well. I tried to chunk out as much time this summer to really recover. Now I could still come do a 60-minute talk. I would just have to go lay in the fetal position the rest of the afternoon and just watch stupid Netflix shows to deal with that stress. So please don't feel like I have this all figured out. I'm giving you what I do every day. I'm basically sharing my self-care plan with you on that handout that you have, because these are some of the best practices and I try to really live it. And even living that every day doesn't mean that I don't struggle as well. So let's get rolling here. One of the things when I talk about trauma-informed care, one of the things that we talk about in the trauma literature is this idea of protective factors. In other words, when we speak about, which is the topic of this training, resiliency, if there's certain variables within your life, within your situation, before trauma hits, you're more likely to recover quicker from trauma. And I'm just summing up a whole lot of research in kind of a sloppy way here. But you're less likely to carry the pain and suffering of trauma with you for years, if not decades. Things like relationships, access to mental health treatment, a supportive friend group, financial stability, a lot of different protective factors. So when we look at how we entered this pandemic, these last 20 months, we weren't doing good already. I like to really make everything very concrete in my head, but if you packed a football stadium or a basketball stadium in your area of the country with people from different professions, and really you had some mental health services and you wanted to identify the people that needed those mental health services the most, but all we knew about that crowd was their profession. We would first call our physicians up, followed up by our nurses, followed up by social service and social workers, then our educators, then our folks in the criminal justice system. In other ways, we weren't doing well. The AMA was saying like over 50% of physicians were experiencing severe symptoms of burnout. We know that nurses really struggle. I just heard a CPR story that 53% of nurses here in Colorado are expecting to leave the field in the next 18 months. In other words, we may not have a healthcare system in our state if that turns out to be true. And again, so if you look at this list and you wanted to find the most burned out place in your community, it's probably a federally qualified health center. It's probably a clinic in the hospital, a healthcare for the homeless organization. We've got to change this, but this is our reality coming in. So a way to look at resiliency, and again, I always like to simplify things, make things concrete, is I'm going to give you a very simple analogy, look at how we look at stress. And this really is hard for me to do a training without a slide about the brain in it. But with only 60 minutes, I know that would take 20 minutes of my time. And so I'm going to spare you that. But I want to sum this up. When we talk about resiliency, what are we talking about? Now, we will talk about that there's some psychological components of resiliency. But a lot of it, when we talk about the resiliency is our ability to recover, to handle and recover stress, a lot of this is done in the unconscious part of our nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. So when we look at this analogy to really simplify a lot of this complex science, it's the cup analogy has two parts. The first part of the analogy is the size of the cup. And this really represents the health of our nervous system, our prefrontal cortex ability to help regulate the fear-based response of the amygdala. We can also look at this if you're familiar with polyvagal theory. The parasympathetic, specifically the ventral vagal nerve, the ventral branch of the vagus nerve, how that is doing regulating the sympathetic or anxiety-based response. And so we can actually start to measure our resiliency. And this is, to me, really exciting. And I won't go too far into it. But again, we can start to quantify this in really cool ways. And so one of the things that we really want to look at is, what do we do each and every day to improve the health of our nervous system? Because there will be some psychological components of this, but a lot of this is done at that unconscious level, how we maintain homeostasis and manage allostolic load. And so the size of the cup is going to represent the health of our biology and also our psychology to manage stress. In other words, really the foundations to support our resiliency. Now, the second part of this analogy is how much water is in your cup at any given time. Now, water roughly, because like everything with our neurobiology, cortisol is much more complex than we thought it was. But roughly, the water represents the cortisol that's in your system, or that stress hormone. And so what we want to do, whether you just want to call it stress, we want to put cortisol on it, is that, again, we want to have a healthy nervous system, a healthy mind and neurobiology to manage stress, to be resilient to stress. And then we want to try to manage the level of stress in our cup at any given time. So I like to think about the area between the level of stress or cortisol in our body and our capacity is our window of tolerance. In other words, we can bring all those brilliant characteristics of our prefrontal cortex into our work: cognitive flexibility, emotional regulation, problem solving, all those things that a lot of times people will give you credit for the empathy and compassion you have. I want to give you credit for the brilliance that you bring to your work of looking at someone's situation, looking at someone's history, and really being able to plan out, what does this individual need to live the life that they aspire for? And we don't give you nearly enough credit for the brilliance of what you do each and every day. So again, that water in the cup represents cortisol. Now, as that water rises, the window starts to close, and that's where we shift in more to the sympathetic branch, or the amygdala. We can also have sort of a shutdown or low energy response, which again, for my polyvagal folks out there, that dorsal vagal response, which is often associated with levels of depression in our system as well. So again, way to really sum up this complexity. It also lets me talk about thinking about managing different streams going into our cup. And we can't just overlook stress in our personal life. The one strategy that I got, and I got a lot of letters behind my name, as I like to say, those just really represent my student loan debt at this point more than anything else. But through all that student loan debt of 9 years of student loan debt that I accrued, the one self-care strategy I got was leave work at work and home at home. Now, I still think that there's some benefit to that. I always try, if I'm commuting, to have a stop sign where I'm like, okay, I'm going to process my day till I hit that stop sign. Then I'm going to just jam my favorite music out and try to like leave the day at that stop sign going home. So I've tried to do that. But one of the things that the neurobiology confronts us with is you get one cup. So if there's a lot of trauma going on in your personal life, it is nearly impossible for that not to impact your work performance. But vice versa as well, is if you're struggling with trauma or burnout in your work environment, that's going to impact your relationships and your life outside work as well. So one of the stressors we do want to just make sure that we're managing is our personal life as well. We'll talk about some ways to, again, make that concrete with some interventions and best practice strategies. Then there's empathetic intensity. This is why when you look at this list of burnout professions, what do these professions all have in common? They're exposed to a lot of difficult emotions, depression, anxiety, fear, doing a lot of work in housing and homelessness, hopelessness, just trauma that we are exposed to day in out. And our whole society has experienced just this flooding of difficult emotions, the anxiety around this that's turned into anger, that's turned into withdrawal, that some people just, in some ways given up, and so when we expose ourselves, social scientists talk about emotions like viruses, that they're highly contagious. So I don't really have time to get into details of compassion, fatigue, vicarious, and secondary trauma. But what I do want you to know is that a lot of us can get PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder diagnosis. In other words, we make the symptom aspects of that diagnosis, with the identifiable trauma only being the work that we do. So there are real dangers out there. Other thing that's so key is moral distress and injury. This used to be a slide in my trainings. Now I'm doing whole 90-minute workshops on this topic. Hearing a lot of this come out of the pandemic, when healthcare professionals were not being able to give the level and quality of care that they wanted to give their patients. I've experienced this quite a bit, whether it was the organization I was working for or whether it was the system I'm in, when I felt like I had to fight for some of just the basic rights and needs of the people that I was trying to help. If you feel like you're in a system, and I've actually worked for some really dysfunctional organizations over the years, I had to fight my leadership in my own organization to just try to get what I think is right for the clients and patients I was working with. Again, that's that moral distress. And if there's enough moral distress, and I've experienced this, and it is just traumatic in its own right, it can create moral injury, a lot of anger, a lot of fear. I just found myself, how I was behaving was very aggressive, yelling a lot of meetings, because if you're going to hurt the people that I care about and I work with, I'm going to fight back at you. It wasn't a very good way to problem solve. Didn't get a whole lot of accomplished, but I was just, my cup was overflowing. It was my amygdala response to that stress. And then just everything else that we have on our plate. Now, I think if you look at those lists for the highest level of burnout, those professions, physicians, nurses, social service workers, social workers, teachers, principals, do they have a lot of work? Absolutely, yes. Do they have an inherently more amount of work than other professions? Not necessarily. Having transcended a lot of different areas, while I would not say you have less work than anybody, I don't think it's the workload that necessarily puts us on that burnout list. It's more that emotional side of things. However, we also have a lot of work to manage on top of the empathetic intensity inherent to the work that we do. Now, there's certain things that really challenge our resiliency. In other words, it takes a little drop of stress that may just, we can shake off, and really makes it sticky in our cup. In other words, really fills our cup up and can keep it up there at high levels. And the first one is duration. And through the neurobiological research, we know that 20 months is too long. There's this term called chronic trauma. Sometimes you'll hear it called small t trauma. And my definition of chronic trauma is living under high levels of stress with the threat of traumatic events occurring at any given time. This is a way to say homelessness. Even if waking up on a shelter on a typical Tuesday isn't necessarily a traumatic event for somebody, we know that there's a lot of real mental health, medical health consequences to surviving homelessness. And so it gives us a way to say, yeah, even though if a traumatic event doesn't happen, somebody living on the street, living in and out of shelters, is living in poverty is another example of this, can create damage to the nervous system, just like those traumatic events. So living in a high level of stress with the threat of traumatic events occurring, that's been the last 20 months. For so many of us. And so a lot of us, when I say the last 20 months have been traumatic, for most of us, I don't use that word lightly. I want you to hear that. I don't throw trauma around like, oh, everything traumatizes everybody. No, but 20 months living under all these stresses, not just the pandemic, but our politics, fight for civil rights, all this stuff is enough to again create that damage to our resiliency. And really what it's doing is lowering our capacity, lowering the size of our cup. So we're not going to be able to manage stress in the way maybe we were doing before the pandemic. Also, uncertainty. That really hit us big these last 20 months. Am I going to be okay? Is my family going to survive this? Are we going to make progress for social, racial justice in our country? Are we going to even have a country, right? I remember flipping on, it's like, seems like it was 6 years ago on January 6th, I checked the news and, our nation's capital was being overtaken. And I kind of expected this to happen. We were in such a high level place, so much uncertainty about the patient's health, the client's health, our coworkers' health, our family's health. Again, another reason why the duration of this is so powerful. And this is the kicker for us, we care. We care about the health of our community. We care about our patients. If we didn't care about the work and the people that we were trying to help, we wouldn't be on that burnout list. But because we care, we deal with this high level of uncertainty, even before the pandemic, of working with folks that might be addicted to opiates and could overdose, or in intimate partner violence relationships, or worried about children and maybe potentially abusive households, or trying to help someone with a chronic disease find the motivation, be adherent to medication that might save their life. All those things, we deal with such a high level of uncertainty. I found out really quick is, leave work at work is good, but I had a client talk about committing suicide. Nobody told me how to leave that at the stop sign, how to just drop that and go have a fabulous evening. And this is where the level of uncertainty and importance is so powerful in our field. And then you add this duration to it. And again, that's where a lot of us are really struggling, including, again, myself right now as well. So what does trauma look like with the cup analogy? For a traumatic event, it just overwhelms our ability to cope. It's like dropping our cup in a bucket of stress that just overwhelms our ability to cope. So we'll go in that fight, flight, or freeze response. Again, with chronic stress, our cup has been holding so much stress for so long that it's really starts to harm prefrontal cortex functioning, ventral vagal functioning. So again, the biology behind our resiliency starts to wear down over time as well. And again, we'll also see our optimism, our hope, all those other things too kind of go down with that. So from the psychological and biological perspective. So I had to throw this in here because I think this is, to me, the most important slide when we think about self-care as it applies to resiliency. And this is a very simple, I like to use the word helping fatigue as a more umbrella term to put under there moral injury and distress, to compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, secondary trauma, also just burnout or work stress as well. So all the challenges that hit our resiliency, even just on a normal day, is really looking at how do we look at where we are and how do we structure a self-care plan to maximize our resiliency. So this really simple 4-stage burnout really helps. Again, I like simple things. I like concrete things. And I'm going to ask you to think about yourself here a little bit as well. So the goal of all this, the goal of any self-care, organizational wellness, healthy organizational culture is to really bring our best self to work every day, to be healthy, motivated, and highly engaged in our work. However, we work, I would imagine most folks are in that social service, social work category on this call. We work with nurses, physicians as well. So when we work in these high burnout professions, like number one on that is healthcare, we're going to struggle with exhaustion from time to time. And I think part of our resiliency is saying, yeah, we're not going to be 100% all the time, but how do we catch ourselves when we hit exhaustion? And so what are some triggers that we can say, hey, we're holding too much stress in our cup for a too long period of time, and I'm starting to get some of the warning signs that I'm shifting out of that healthy, motivated, engaged into that exhaustion stage. And I just want to acknowledge a lot of us are beyond exhaustion. But I want to give you this information to hold on to, if nothing else. And on your self-care sheet, you will see an area to really write down your physical, psychological, and social triggers. So when we talk about physical triggers, what are we talking about? Now, those, a lot of times we know that sympathetic nervous system that really gets activated when we're feeling more anxious is highly connected to trigger points throughout our body. So we'll get soreness in the neck, shoulders, back. I like to call them 230 headaches. They're just stress headaches that come out. So oftentimes the most obvious is our physical triggers. So my question to you for your self-care plan is, how do you know, how's your body tell you you're holding on to too much stress? Also, our mind will give us warning signs as well. From whatever your baseline is, basically we're talking about a little bit more anxiety or a little bit more depression, or both. I see that in a lot of people's where I might be more anxious. So, for me, one of the ways my psychological triggers is trouble going to sleep. kind of ruminating about work. So I lay down and I remember like the emails I was supposed to send, and I just can't kind of get the day out of my head in order to fall asleep. If I hit stage 2, which I'll talk about here in a second, I'll start waking up at 2:30, 3:30 in the morning, and the first thought in my head is work. And sometimes I actually get up and start checking emails. I haven't done that in years because I know that's not very healthy, but that's a real sign that I've now progressed probably beyond exhaustion. The other thing I'm seeing with psychological triggers is an over-reliance on drugs and alcohol as a coping skill. One of the pieces, besides what we're seeing in healthcare with our workforce's health right now, is just in society in general, the level of drug and alcohol consumption seems to have skyrocketed during the pandemic. So drugs and alcohol, I'm not a guy who's against, hey, if it's safe for you, have a drink. You can make whatever Colorado joke you want, have a gummy, whatever that is for you, great if that's safe for you to do. There's nothing wrong with that, in my opinion. But what we want to be careful of is drugs and alcohol are a really great way to feel better. That's why we like drugs and alcohol. They make us feel better, but they can't become our primary coping skill, right? If you want to have a drink, a glass of wine on a Friday, great. But when we're struggling with burnout already, we want to really make sure that that doesn't become our primary coping skill. Just puts us vulnerable into consequences, and drugs and alcohol don't necessarily promote better health and wellness in the short, medium, or long term as well. So again, if you want to have a drink on a Friday night, no problem with that. Just make sure it doesn't become your primary coping skills. And then the social triggers as well. Now, social triggers with your work can be struggling with empathy and compassion, because those things are incredibly exhausting. They're incredibly rewarding as well, but they're really psychological tasking things to do for 8 hours, 9 hours at a time. So that becomes difficult. In our social lives, we may self-isolate more. I know this is when I got really kind of burned out in my career at times. I didn't want to go hang out with friends. I didn't really want to talk to anybody, because God forbid you have a problem. I've been talking to people with problems all day. If you have a problem, I don't have energy for that. So let me just curl up and watch The Simpsons, because I can just zone out. So some of us might withdraw. If you've got children at home or a spouse or a partner, sometimes we can hold it together during the workday, but just have less patience for them. So that can be another trigger as well. So the key here is to know your triggers, because what we want to do in the best of times, and I know I'm not talking during the best of times, is I really encourage, and I want to at least plant this seed with you right now. Even if you're not, if you want to focus on recovery, I want to support that 1000%. But ideally, I think it's important to give you is I want everybody to have a proactive self-care plan. In other words, what are you going to do every day, every week, and maybe every month to bring your best self to work and keep yourself healthy under all these challenges that we've talked about? Then when you start to see some of those triggers, again, we're talking about the best of times, is when I find myself stepping into exhaustion, what is my reactive self-care plan to get back into healthy, motivated, engaged? Now, if I catch myself earlier enough, for me personally, it's a 3-day weekend. It can be a pretty simple thing. For a lot of us now, and this is my primary challenge for you, is what is your recovery plan? Like I said, we've all been carrying around way too much stress for the last 20 months. How are you going to, over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, recover from that? If you are at all familiar with the trauma literature, trauma doesn't heal itself. We need support to overcome trauma. So hopefully I can put a few things on your list as we shift into the self-care piece of this. Just a few other things on these other stages here. Shame, guilt, and doubt is a real dangerous place to be right now, because I think a lot of us with that moral distress are here. What are we pulled to? Most of us realize we need to be 100% all the time for us to have the impact we want for our patients, our community. When we know they need us here and we can only give, let's say, even 90%, we start to feel guilt that we're not giving everybody our best self. What's one of the common reactions to that? We work longer. We take work home with us. We're checking emails at 6:30, 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, 10:30 at night, which obviously will increase exhaustion even more. Cynicism and callousness, you just start, this becomes more of who you are, because at the end of shame, guilt, and doubt, you're getting little pleasure out of work, but also life as well. So cynicism and callousness almost become a trait, where exhaustion, shame, doubt, and guilt are more state reactions to holding too much stress. Cynicism and callousness, like your heart becomes a concrete monument to who you once were. You just have this anger, passive aggressiveness. And then crisis. As a self-care trainer, I've had plenty of people say, my marriage broke up because of work stress. I had a friend, and I've heard this professionally as well. I have cancer. She's a teacher. She just, got through a battle with breast cancer. Beautiful young mother, great teacher, great family, and it was touch and go for a while. And she actually it was safe for her to meet with my wife the other day, and she's like, I'm pretty sure this is because of work stress. Guess where she is right now? She's back in that school environment that she identified was the cause of her cancer. We got to rethink this, my friends. I hear that. I'm not the parent that I want to be because of work stress. And so this is basically to scare you to stay with me through the next 15 minutes or so, is that there's a lot of consequences if we don't take care of ourselves. Heart disease, cancer, diabetes, a range of mental health problems, as well as social problems too. So as I like to say, as we go down these stages of change, not only do we have negative mental health issues, but we're also delivering a lower quality of care for the people that we have dedicated our lives to serve. So do it for you, do it for the folks you serve. Now, as we start to look at resiliency and building resiliency through best practices in self-care, I always like to say there's a balance to this. One is acknowledging we got to go to work every day and help people live better lives. How freaking amazing is that, right? We have somewhere along the line, something about us has said, I'm going to dedicate my life to the service of others. And we get to do that every day. I don't know who I would be after the last 20 months if I was a banker. Like if all I had to think about is balancing some balance sheet somewhere. The fact I get to get up every day and do something positive for the world, that to me is probably my greatest source of resiliency. We got each other. Our team health, our organizational culture is such a big part of this. And then again, how do we look at our self-care? So plenty of stuff on your self-care worksheet. I want to challenge you. You can put this on the back burner, proactive and reactive. Proactive, what do I do each day when I'm healthy to keep myself healthy? Reactive, when I start to see some of those triggers, what is my response? And I've got some structure in there for you. I'm giving you total permission right now to focus on this last bullet point. If you found yourself in exhaustion for a long period of time or any of those other stages, I really want you to think about what are you going to do next 3 months, next 6 months, next 12 months to really get yourself back into health and wellness. So one of the things where we got to start and we can't skip over is, hey, what makes that nervous system healthy? There are certain practices that we can do that improve the functioning of our nervous system that allow us to create a greater capacity to handle stress. If we don't pay attention to these, our nervous system is not going to be as resilient to the stress inherent to our work and life. One of the best things you can do, get 8 hours of sleep. One thing you can do between now and tomorrow to bring your best self to work, get a good night's sleep. Just a few strategies here: sleep consistency, wake time, and going to sleep at the same time really sets that circadian rhythm in a way that maximizes that good sleep. Again, most of us need at least 8 hours of sleep. Some people are genetically, blessed, as I like to say, that they may only need 6 or 7, but most of us need 8 or more, actually. So if you have trouble sleeping, I really encourage you to Google sleep hygiene. You'll get a great round of really good best practices to help you here. Also, nutrition. If we put unhealthy foods in our body, it actually exacerbates the stress response. There's a lot of attention being paid to anti-inflammatory and inflammatory foods. So inflammatory foods have a reaction in your body, much like if you're allergic or sensitive to something. And what that does is it really, whatever you put in your cup during the day, it's going to exacerbate the negative impact that has on your nervous system. There's also anti-inflammatory foods, basically foods you know you should eat, things like probiotics, dark chocolate, berries, nuts, olive oil, lean protein, those sort of things can actually suppress and promote a healthy stress response. So a lot of really great material around that as well. And then movement. Movement's the best way I've seen to get that stress, that cortisol out of your cup. And I say movement, if you're an exerciser, I just want to support that. But if we move, and neurobiologists are falling in love with things like taking a walk, because, you know, that also gets that stress. So even if you don't have the energy to go for a 10-mile run or whatever, just take a longer walk, you know, or whatever you're able to do. That low grade sort of exercise gets you some great results, and your chance of injury is very low as well. So again, don't skip. And I give you a lot of my best practices because of time. I can't go into these a lot, but a lot of the things that I apply in my own self-care strategies are on your handout. So one, let's pay attention to those physical aspects of resiliency. Now let's look at some mental health aspects of resiliency. So one of the things that we know through the research that really helps us stay resilient in the face of hardship and stress and traumatic times like the last 20 months is keeping connected to our values. And I like to say your why. Why did you dedicate your life to the service of your community? For people that might be struggling, for people that experience racism and stigmatism or are stigmatized in other areas of society, why did you dedicate your life to this work? It's the people, and this is research-based, that hold on to that why, keep that why in front of their mind, keep their values in front of their mind, that have much more resiliency in the face of hardship. I put the definitions here for moral courage and moral resiliency. This is the flip side of moral distress and injury. So we know that people that stay grounded in their values, grounded in their purpose and passion, have the ability to speak out, to take those hard stands. Also, Angela Duckworth's work around grit has been very informative to me. We'll talk about the perseverance piece here in a second, but she found that people that live their passion each day have more grit. In other words, grit being resiliency in the face of hardship, but also the ability to perform better under pressure. And just as a bonus, people that get to live their passion live longer and healthier lives. So if we can avoid all these other pitfalls, there's some benefits out here waiting for us as well. The other piece from a mental health perspective I got to put on your radar is mindfulness. I'm imagining I don't have to go in too far. So for time's sake, it needs to be on your self-care plan. There seems to be a really nice ceiling of 20 minutes a day that you get maximum benefits. So if you want to be an A++ student, that's where you want to shoot for. If you can only get 5 minutes a day, that is great as well. And so I see mindfulness. I grew up as a basketball player, and I always would practice free throws, and free throws are kind of boring. And I'll be honest, I don't get really overly excited to practice mindfulness for 20 minutes every morning before work. But just like free throws, I practice free throws to develop a set of skills. I practice mindfulness to develop the parts of my nervous system that support resiliency. People that practice mindfulness have larger prefrontal cortex. They have stronger ventral vagal, less sympathetic activation, especially as it borderlines on anxiety. It's a healthy activation, not an anxiety based. So I'm really almost taking my resiliency parts of my nervous system to the gym. That's how I look at this. So just like shooting free throws wasn't my favorite thing to do as a basketball player, what I found was when I got in the game, I had already built those skills, that muscle memory, to step up the line and knock down the shots. Now, when I get stressed out, I can take a breath without you even knowing it. And I bring that calm and peace that I've practiced now for 15 years into that present moment of anxiety. So I can catch my cup rising, that stress level, my window of tolerance closing. One breath helps me regulate it. Now, it's taken a long time to get there, but even if you're not doing anything, start today. And if you find your mind wandering, and I used to say, I'm not good at mindfulness, it doesn't work for me. Well, when your mind wanders initially and you bring it back to your focus on your breath or a mantra or a prayer or a yoga pose, that's where you get the maximum benefit early on in your practice. So even being bad at mindfulness, is actually a good thing, which is kind of cool to find in the research. The other thing from a mental health perspective is therapy. I imagine if I'm looking at, I think knowing who is on this list, I bet a lot of you have access to free therapy through your employee assistance program. Give them a call. Give them a call. Even if you don't need all 6 sessions, which would amaze me because I know I needed that and more just with what's been going on. Go in the call, get that help process what you've been through these last 20 months. Therapy is a way to build resiliency. That's how I see it, build strength. I'm the person I am today. I'm the professional I am today because I've engaged therapy as a tool throughout my career. Moving forward, I always like to say therapy can be really helpful if you find things in your home life are impacting your work life. Great sign that you could benefit from a little mental health services. Also, if work is starting to impact your home life, another really great piece. So if you're sitting on some free sessions, I hope I don't have to preach to this group about not stigmatizing your own mental health services. Please considering access those. Go twice and have your therapist tell you you're too healthy for therapy. I'll give you 30 minutes of my time to brag about how you were able to achieve that because I might have a few things to learn from you as well. Final piece here on the personal side is our social networks. A lot of great research out there. Quote by Jim Rohn's, really good one. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. We have signed up to walk into stress and trauma as part of the work we do, as part of the populations we've decided to serve. Now we get joy, we get happiness, we get to watch people's lives change. But if your jobs were like mine, for every one great direction somebody's going in, for every success, there's probably 10 challenges that I'm going to be dealing with that day. So we sign up for this stress and traumatic being exposed to that. So it's a challenge to us to make sure we balance that off in our personal life with people that bring happiness and joy. One of the best things for our resiliency is having amazing people that bring joy, love, compassion into our own life as well. So I don't have time to show my really funny video, so I apologize for that. I love that video, but I want to put a few more ideas into your self-care plan, and this is recovery time. There's 2 ways I really want you to look at recovery time. One is I'm in this battle against the fact that we never unplug from work stress. I'm in a battle against it because of the research, the levels of burnout. I like to think, if you think about the cup analogy, we go to work, we have a manageable amount of stress in our cup. It's going to increase throughout the day. That's a job. Especially one of the most stressful jobs there are in any industries. We're going to increase the amount of cortisol and distress in our cup. And then ideally, when we leave work, we enter a recovery stage. It's just like an athlete after a long workout is we disconnect from work. We implement a few self-care strategies throughout the night. We get a good night's sleep. In other words, we're reducing the impact and the amount of stress in our body. Now, in our modern work environment, we all have these amazing phones that we carry with us anywhere. I can check work email 24/7 anywhere in the world, pretty much, as long as I got a Wi-Fi connection. And so what I see so much is, get home around 6:30 or 7, I start checking email again. What does that do with the cup analogy? One, it stops the recovery process. We've plugged back into work distress, and not every email tells me what a beautiful, wonderful person I am. People assign me tasks. People tell me I screwed up, whatever that was. So we're actually increasing, instead of decreasing our stress, we're actually adding more stress to our cup. I get the pull. Hey, if I don't check it in the evening, I'll have more in the morning. Research says that it's healthier to even go into work 15 minutes early if that's what you need to catch up. And so we've got to start disconnecting, and that's on vacations as well. I'm just tired of people emailing me on vacation. We need that time to disconnect. Also, just want to put on your radar, I know it can be difficult, but there is a lot of great research out there on the power of a 2-week vacation. And I think a lot of people, if you can schedule that, maybe it's not in the next 3 months, maybe it's 6 or even 7 months out. Trying to get that time gives us a tremendous amount of time away. And don't call it vacation if you're checking emails every day. away from work to do this. So again, this recovery time is so important. Final thing I want to kind of put on a couple more ideas is how we work. I like to really, now if you're seeing patients or clients, that's going to put you a little bit in a different category, but most of us have some electronic medical record stuff we have to deal with, administrative work. I'm old enough where we used to call it paperwork that we have to do from time to time. And sometimes just getting stuff done can get some of that stress out of our cup. So I like to call these hyper efficiency sprints. If you want to put a bunch of neurobiological research together, one is our brain can only operate at maximum capacity for 120 minutes. So we've got to start to integrate breaks back into our workday. If what you're doing after 2 hours is important to you, because if not, our productivity just kind of falls off a cliff. Also, when we're doing this, trying to minimize distractions. If we can turn email notification off, if we can turn our phone off. Now, sometimes you may be able to do that, sometimes you're not. In other words, to stop multitasking. That's what the buzz on your phone does. That's what the email pop-up does. And it can lower our productivity by upwards of 90%, which takes away 2.1 hours a day from us. Now, again, if you're seeing clients and patients most of the time, this might only be an hour a day for you if you want to cut that out, because this is across industries. But still, that could be 4 or 5 additional hours a week. And if you do 2 hyper efficiency sprints, if you've never done these, it's amazing how much work you've done. Just the takeaway, human beings are great for 2-hour stretches when they focus on one thing. Now, you can complete that task and go to another task, but when we focus on that one thing, we're incredibly brilliant thinkers, problem solvers, and we're incredibly efficient as well. All right, one more thing to put on your list is professional development. Now, this may just seem overwhelming right now, so if you want to zone out for a second, I don't blame you, but I really see this as part of our self-care. When we talk about Angela Duckworth's grit, one is passion, the other is perseverance. And this is where I like to bring in this concept of the 20-mile march. And this comes from, there was a race to be the first people to get to the South Pole, Amiston and Scott. And they had 2 very different philosophies. Scott just got up every day and really looked at the weather and decided how far to march. Maybe if there was a blizzard out, they stayed in camp. If it was really sunny, maybe they get 25, 30 miles. Whereas Amiston got up every day and said, we're going to march 20 miles today. You can Google the outcome of this race, but Amiston won, but I don't have time to go into what happened to Scott's expedition. Not very good outcome. So what this is taken away with is, what can you do every day to be a little bit better? And I like to be very concrete about this. So what is your 20-mile march? So do you have a commute? And could you listen to maybe a work-related audiobook or podcast on your way to work? Maybe you don't listen, maybe you'll just listen to music on the way home. I know my morning routine, which takes about an hour to do, and I don't have children at home, so I've got that benefit, I'll admit. But I put on some headphones. I've always got an audiobook and some podcasts that are work related. So really, by the time I get to ready to check in at work, I've got about an hour of professional development in. With my breaks throughout the day, I can get another half hour to hour in. So every day I get anywhere from 60 minutes to 2 hours of professional development in. Why I think this is a self-care strategy is, one, if I'm getting better at something, I'm going to be better at it, right? If I'm building expertise, if I'm building a new skill base, I'm going to be better at my job. However, what I really think this is from a self-care perspective, if I'm pushing myself and challenging myself to be better at a skill, to develop an expertise, in other words, I'm on a professional journey, a bad day becomes a learning opportunity. It's still a bad day. It's still going to fill my cup up, but maybe there's some things in there I can learn from that. Whereas if I'm just surviving the day, it can become all-encompassing. So again, what Duckworth found with her work was the people that really thrived, both from a resiliency perspective, but also just thrived professionally. Again, they focused on their passion, but they also was working at least a little bit every day to be better. All right, the final piece I have for you is, I hope I made in the short time I have a decent argument for you need to take care of yourself for your own resiliency, for your own health, your medical health, your mental health, your social health. There's a lot of consequences there if we don't. Also, we know I title my training Self-Care is Quality Care for a reason, because there's plenty of research out there to show when we're burned out, when we look at those physicians, nurses, social services, and social workers, our quality dips. We're not able to give our best self to the folks we've dedicated ourselves to serve. The final piece here is our teammates. I'm going to have a bad day. Do you have a little bit of capacity in your cup to support me? And hopefully, if you have some struggles or a bad day, I've got some capacity in my cup to support you as well. So again, we need to do this for us because you're worth it. We need to do this for our patients and clients because they need us at our best. And we need to be that teammate, not that burns everybody out and frustrates everybody, but is there to really be that supportive person when folks need us as well. So I want to thank you for my time. I want to thank ACU for allowing me to be a small part of all y'all's great work. I want to thank you just from the bottom of my heart for all the work that you have done over the last 20 months. You are my heroes. You were my heroes before all this happened, honestly. If I were to create human beings who would step up, put their own health and wellness at risk to serve their community, that is you all. If I were to create the worst people to then step back and be a little selfish and say, what do I need now? I don't think we're well designed for that, my friends. So I hope this message helps you think about that. This is my email. One thing, I love talking about this, so please feel free to reach out here. And hey, if you want to nerd out with me about your autonomic nervous system, I'm giving away my latest book for free. You can find that at optimalhrv.com. So Michelle, everybody, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Matt. As always, just an excellent, wonderful presentation, and so much that we can apply not just to our workforce, but to all of us as well. And I see that you stopped sharing. I was wondering, I just wanted to share the last few slides, and I'm happy to do that.
My fault there.
Yep, no worries. Perfect. Okay. And if you could so we really just want to let everybody know that we have some other upcoming trainings really focus on the well-being and resilience of providers and really everyone in the staff at a health center. So actually tomorrow we have our second session for our Building Back Better webinar series. Actually on Thursday, not tomorrow. I'm off by a day. My apologies. And this is going to focus on hiring neurodiverse individuals. Next slide, please. And then these are just different resources that we have that are specifically focused on the well-being of health center staff. So please, as Matt said, it's so important for, everybody to take care of themselves. And then also that's the way to be able to take care of your staff. So if you want more resources, please go here, and all of these slides will be made available to everyone. And then I believe there's just one last slide, and this is how you can contact us. So I want to say again, thank you so much, Matt, that your presentations are always excellent. I know we're just 2 minutes left. I don't know if anybody had any questions. I did not see any in the chat, but as always, getting a lot of praise. So
thank you, everybody. Thanks for all the amazing work you do.
Yeah. And please go ahead, if you haven't, to fill out the session poll. And Suzanne, did you have a question? I think I saw you raise your hand. Oh, you might be on mute, Suzanne.
I did not have a question. Sorry about that.
Oh, no worries.
All good. I was trying to give a thumbs up, and I raised my hand instead. Thank you, Matt.
No worries. Well, again, thank you so much, Matt. Thank you so much for everybody being here. If you haven't filled out the poll, please go ahead. And anything you need, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everybody.
Wonderful. Bye, everybody.